Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Literary Lens. Since UGC NET English exam is approaching, I thought of making a video where we'll do a very rapid revision of literary theories, because from the exam point of view, obviously literary theory and criticism plays a very important role. So here in this video, very shortly, we'll discuss about key critic. I'll explain one main core idea of that particular theory, and we'll solve one important NET style MCQ from each theory. Okay, so let's start this crash course before the exam. The first theory now we are going to learn is structuralism. So structuralism is mainly associated with Ferdinand de Saussure. He was the key critic of this theory, and his most important work was Course in General Linguistics, published in 1916. Remember the year 1916. And he said that meaning is not fixed. It is created through different structures and differences in language. And he has given so many concepts that is related to structuralism. And one of the very important concept or idea, we can say, it's sign, which was the mixture of signifier plus signified. So I have made a video, YouTube Shorts, where I have talked about sign, which was a mixture of signifier and signified, where I talked detailedly about what is signifier, what is signified. You can go and check that video out in the channel. He gave some another concepts like Langue and Parole. Langue, he says that language works as a system, which he called Langue, while the actual speech is Parole. He also gave some another concepts like binary opposition, like the black, white, male, female, arbitrary nature of sign, meaning that is created through differences. Now let's do one MCQ. So he told the question here is, langue refers to what? So I have already told you that langue means underlying structure of language, not the individuals. So here the option E, which was the underlying structure of language, will be the correct answer. The next theory is post-structuralism or deconstruction, and this theory is associated with Jacques Derrida, and one of his most important work was Of Grammatology, published in 1967. So he challenged structuralism by saying that meaning is never stable. So post-structuralism and structuralism both have completely opposite idea to each other, and he has given so many concepts like difference. If we talk about difference, which means that meaning is always differed and different, means meaning is never stable. And another important concept or idea he gave is trace, means every word carries some traces of other meanings, means one meaning can be derived from something else. Okay, and he also gave some another concepts like deconstruction, decentering, free play of signifiers. Now let's do an MCQ. So the question here was, the term trace suggests that meaning is what? Meaning is never fully present. It is partly absent. So here the option C will be the right answer. The term trace suggests that meaning is always partially absent. The next theory is new criticism. So new criticism focuses only on the text, not on the background of the author or the background of the reader. And there are some key critics that is associated with new criticism, that is I.A. Richards, Glenn Brooks, T.S. Eliot. And there are some works, also important works, that is often asked in the NET exam. From that, I have chosen two works, that is Practical Criticism, published in 1929 by I.A. Richards. This is a work of I.A. Richards, and Well Wrought On, published in 1947, it was the work by Glenn Brooks. Okay, and also there are some key concepts that is associated with new criticism. The first is close reading. So as I said, new criticism focuses only on the text. It is based on the close reading. So they emphasize close reading. And concepts, another concepts like intentional fallacy, affective fallacy. So I have made a video about intentional fallacy and affective fallacy. I have made a YouTube shorts actually. You can go and check that shorts out in the channel. Okay, so affective fallacy means judging a text based on reader's emotion is wrong, because on New Criticism what we have read, that it focuses on the close reading of the text. It is not associated with the author or the reader or their emotion. Now let's do an MCQ. So here the question was, affective fallacy refers to, since affective fallacy is about reader's emotional response, the correct answer is going to be option B, that is reader's emotional response. The next theory is Marxist criticism. So Marxist criticism sees literature as a product of class struggle and ideology. And some key thinkers or critics that is associated with this theory is Karl Marx, who is very important, Engels, Gramsci, Raymond Williams, and there are some important works like the Communist Manifesto published in 1848, Culture and Society by Raymond Williams published in 1958, and some key concepts like base and superstructure, ideology, class struggle, false consciousness, hegemony. So one of the very important concept is hegemony, which means control through consent, not by force. Now let's do an MCQ. So the MCQ, the question here is, which concept explains the cultural dominance without force? And here, as the question was asking us about the cultural dominance without force, the concept hegemony is related to it. So the correct answer is going to be option D. The next theory is Psychoanalytic criticism, means what is going on in our mind. So this theory explains literature using the human consciousness. And who was the main critics? Like Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Jacques Lacan, and some important works like Freud's important work was The Interpretation of Dreams, published in 1900. And there are some key concepts that is often asked in UGC NET exam, that is ID, ego, superego, Oedipus complex, repression, unconscious, mirror stays. So Lacan has given the idea of mirror stays, remember, which was related to identity formation. So now let's do an MCQ. Here the question was, mirror stays is associated with whom? So the answer is, we know that it is associated with Jacques Lacan. So the correct answer is option C. Now let's learn about feminist criticism. So feminist criticism studies women's representation and patriarchy. Okay, it talks about this. So important critics that is associated with feminist criticism are Simone de Beauvoir, Elaine Sowalter, and some important sects like The Second Sex, which was published in 1949, A Literature of Their Own, published in 1977, and obviously some key concept that is associated with feminist criticism. Before you go to the exam, please make sure to read about these concepts. Patriarchy, gender versus sex, gynocriticism, female literary tradition, representation of women. So Sowalter here introduced gynocriticism, remember, which studies about women's writing by women themselves. So here the MCQ was, who coined the term gynocriticism, as was coined by Elaine Sowalter. So the correct answer is option C. The next theory is reader response theory. So this theory says that meaning is created by the reader. It is not fixed in the text. Like if you are a reader and you interpret some kind of a meaning of a text, it is on you. What you want to interpret, it is on you. So here are some key critics that is associated with reader response theory, that is Stanley Fish, Wolfgang Iser, and some important works like Is There a Text in the Class, published in 1980. And some key concepts that is associated with this theory is interpretive community, implied reader, origin of expectation, reader's role in meaning. So remember that Stanley Fish has talked about the interpretive community. Okay, meaning that group of readers, they share the reading strategies. Okay, so the MCQ is based on this only. The MCQ, the question here was, the interpretive communities emphasize on what? So the interpretive communities, they focus on shared reading strategies. So the correct answer is option C. Next is post-colonial theory, a very important theory, mind you. So post-colonial theory studies about colonial power, identity, and resistance. And the key critics that is associated, Edward Said, Homike Bhabha, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, and some important works like Orientalism published in 1978. Remember, it is often asked in the exam, which was published or which was the work of Edward Said. The Location of Culture, 1994. So, Spivak's famous essay is Can the Subaltern Speak? Remember. And some key concepts like Orientalism, hybridity, mimicry, otherness, subaltern. These are some of the concepts that is associated with post-colonial theory and often asked in the exam. So make sure to, before you go to the exam, make sure you read about all these concepts. So here the MCQ was, Can the Subaltern Speak is written by, as now we discussed, Can the Subaltern Speak is an essay that is written by Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. So the correct answer is option C. The next theory is focused on the history itself. So the next theory is New Historicism. So New Historicism says that literature and history, they influence each other, like they hype each other up. So the main critic of New Historicism is Stefan Greenblatt. So in exam that is often asked, which critic was associated with New Historicism. Remember, Stefan Greenblatt is the main critic of New Historicism. So in New Historicism, they study about literary and non-literary texts together, which focuses on power and discourse. So obviously, one concept that is associated with New Historicism is power and discourse. Some another concepts like circulation of social energy, textuality of history, historicity of text. These are some of the concepts that is associated with New Historicism. And one of the most important work of his is Renaissance Self-Fashioning, published in 1980. So the MCQ was, the question was, the New Historicism studies about what? As we discussed, it studies literature along with its historical documents. So the correct answer is going to be option C, that is literature and non-literary text together. The last theory was Ecocriticism. So Ecocriticism, it studies about the relationship between literature and the environment. And some key critics that is associated with Ecocriticism is Cheryl Glofetti, Lawrence Boyle, and some important work like the Ecocriticism Reader published in 1996. And it challenges about anthropocentrism or the human-centered thinking about the environment. And some key concept was obviously anthropocentrism, ecocentrism, environmental ethics, nature-cultural relationship. So the MCQ, the question was based on this itself, that ecocriticism challenges what? So ecocriticism, it questions about anthropocentrism. So the correct answer is going to be option B. So before we end, remember one golden rule for the literary theory, that is concept plus critic plus work. Means you must remember the concept that is associated with each critic and just read something a very little. Now as you don't have time, read a little about the concept, who was the critic associated with which theory, and the work of those critics and the publication year also. Remember, these three things are very important. Second, in UGC NET, they mostly ask about matching or assertion reason and concept-based MCQs. So you should revise the terminology daily, and this unit can be your high scoring area. So make sure to whatever concepts I have given under each theory, make sure you, before you go to the exam, just revise it a bit. It is definitely going to help you. So if you all found this crash course helpful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the Literary Lens so that I can bring you more UGC NET English revision videos. Thank you and all the best for your upcoming exams.